As reported on February 2nd, 2021, 41,811 people in California died in a single day itself. The rise in COVID infections has gone up by 0.3%. Most industries are failing as well, and the high school dropout rates increased due to online learning. Amidst all of these unfortunate events, it is difficult to see a brighter path ahead. However, one silver lining may be that quarantine due to the pandemic has led to a decrease in pollution, giving us a head start in diminishing climate change.
Climate change is what we define as a shift in what is considered to be normal climatic conditions over a period of time, over a recordable period of time. So when we look at other major climatic events that have happened in the past, like the Ice Age, melting of the glaciers thereafter, a lot of that took place over a fairly long period of time, like hundreds of thousands of years. What we are experiencing now is what we consider human accelerated climate change. And this can include what's probably most commonly talked about, which is global warming, the slow rise of our overall temperature over time. But it can also include changes to our weather patterns. So changes to things like seasonal storms and resulting in some areas severe drought for a prolonged period, and in other cases prolonged heavy storms, which can result in flooding.
Scientists of the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change predict that temperatures will rise from 2.5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit in the next century. Sea level rise and the shrinking of glaciers are two of the many disastrous effects of climate change. With these factors, how does COVID-19 enter the scene?
People have compared it to an apocalypse in slow motion, basically. So, the effects might not necessarily be apparent. There might be not necessarily a point where it's like from here to here. It's just a slow moving disaster that will slowly exacerbate over the next half century.
The beginning of the pandemic, especially in Asia and in China, where the lockdown was a lot earlier than ours, and also the degree of how restricted people were to things outside of the home, you could actually see significant differences in the atmospheric and air quality over parts of China. Yeah. So much so that people were seeing a clear sky for the first time in a really long time in the cities, because there weren't cars that were driving. There were, several factories that had closed. So that seemed, one of the fringe benefits of the world slowly going into a lockdown.
And so there was a study last year done by scientists from Stanford and University of East Anglia, and they estimated that there was a 17% drop in carbon dioxide emissions during the pandemic from January 2020 to March 2020. And then at the height of, when there was lockdowns primarily in March and April, there was around a 10 to 30% drop in greenhouse gas emissions on average. And if you want a concrete number, scientists have estimated that between January 1st and June 30th, there was an 8% drop in emissions total and a 1551 megatons of carbon dioxide decrease. And as you can tell, I guess any decrease is promising, and any decrease in emissions is promising.
Now, as time has gone on, we have these other consequences that have taken place because of COVID. We have more people who are using masks, which is fantastic because it does help to reduce the spread of the virus, but especially when you're dealing like disposable masks, just like any other disposable item, it becomes a possible piece of litter that people might neglect to dispose of properly. So I've seen a fair share of disposable masks just like littered or in storm drains. So that is another concern.
Although littering isn't directly connected to climate change, the lasting impacts of wasted masks will significantly impact our environment.
If you were to look at the Keeling curve which is the carbon dioxide tracking graph is produced by the carbon dioxide tracker from the NOAA that's like stationed out in Hawaii. You would see a little tiny drop in the amount of CO2 overall due to us all being quarantined. But it's really not significant enough for us to say that this is a major win. I think
in order for countries to meet the Paris Agreement deal in 2015, which was an agreement set by almost every country in the world to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, in order to meet that goal, we would need a pandemic level of emissions for basically until 2050 in order to hit that goals, which is kind of amazing if you think about it, that it would take this level of emissions from 2020 to occur every year if we are going to meet our goal of limiting our global temperature change to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Due to quarantine, delivery services have risen and manufacturing is ongoing. These factors continue to agitate the environment.
The things that we might be purchasing or the things that we might be ordering if we're getting food to go or if we're buying groceries for delivery. I think that our consumption of plastic has definitely increased, and plastic is also a product that's made from fossil fuels. It's made from petroleum. So as these products are being disposed of, right, because throwing something in the trash ends up being a lot more convenient for people than trying to recycle it, it goes to a landfill. And the landfills are filling up very quickly without a whole lot of aeration. So as these things start to break down, along with all the other waste that we have put out there, there's more anaerobic decomposition that takes place, which also produces more methane. So we are producing a bunch more methane, and like I said before, the small drop in carbon dioxide emissions because we're not driving as much is still pretty small compared to some of these other sources of greenhouse gas.
With the multiple pros and cons to COVID-19's effect on the environment and climate change, is there a possibility that this can be the first defining step to a greener future?
It's really hard, I think, for not only politicians but also people to continue to wrap their head around all of these different problems. We're all still trying to survive this one problem that has really occupied our attention and occupied our oxygen for the last year. I want to be optimistic and say that once things go back to normal, we will regain some of the traction that we had regarding our issues in climate change. We have a new administration in the White House, and we will be rejoining the Paris Climate Accord. So there are going to be some significant shifts.
Right. So actually, there has been, there's been a decrease in pollution overall. I know there's you see mask pollution, and obviously anecdotally, it may seem like there's more pollution. But if you think about it, COVID-19 has actually shuttered a lot of the factories or slowed down a lot of the factories, which is why I have the data here. Pollution, like the power industry and the power and industries have decreased emissions by around 5%, even despite that people are having to crank out more masks, more PPE. So yeah, I understand that. I've seen a lot of litter as well, but overall there has been a net decrease in pollution. Yeah, actually scientists do see this as kind of a turning point. I think for me personally, I think the biggest implication in the future is the virtual workplace. Because as you know, I have some data here. Transportation is responsible for 23% of global carbon emissions. And one study estimated that at the peak of restrictions, there was 75% decrease in aviation, 50% decrease in surface transport. And that corresponded to air emissions nearly being cut in half and surface transportation nearly being cutting in 17%. So I think virtual work, I think that some workplaces are just never going to go back. And I think that I don't know about socially, but I know for climate, that is a net positive. We shouldn't get complacent. that just because it may seem like there's been a drop in emissions this year, we still need to remember that it's basically nothing. We need something like this every year. So everyone, no matter, even if you think your impact doesn't matter, you should try your best to do your best to limit climate change, because otherwise this is just the death toll we're seeing from COVID-19. This will be just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the brunt of climate change in 50, 75 years. So we need to take action now while we can.